Standing on the promises of Christ my King, through eternal ages let his praises ring. Glory in the highest I will shout and sing, standing on the promises of God. Oh, hi, you got me. Oh well, I was just singing Christmas carols. Standing on the Promises is not one of your Christmas carols? Well, I guess it's probably not one of mine either, but it ought to be. Uh, Good morning. Today is Monday, and it's December 21. It's almost Christmas. And I do want us to think together today about two very elderly people, Simeon and Anna. They're two of my favorites. They were both very, very old. We don't know for sure exactly how old Simeon was. The Bible seems to indicate that Anna was 84 years old. And they both, in their elderly years, wanted to serve God, and they did so every single day in the temple. It was very clear that the characteristic of their life was expecting God to fulfill his promise to send the Messiah, that he might save his people from their sin. And in Luke chapter 2, we are introduced to Simeon and Anna. It's the only place in the Bible where they're mentioned. And as a result of being in the temple serving every day, they happened to be there when Mary and Joseph brought Jesus in order to go through the Rite of Purification as lined out in the book of Leviticus. Jesus was probably 41 days old when this took place. And so when Simeon saw him, he just knew in his spirit that this was the Messiah. We're not told how he knew, but we are told that he knew that this baby was the Messiah. And it says of Simeon, and he came in the Spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to carry out for him the custom of the law, then he took, that is, Simeon took him in his arms and blessed God and said, Now, Lord, you are releasing your bondservant to depart in peace according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of your people Israel. He knew he had seen the Messiah. The fulfillment of God's promise had come. And he had personally been promised, you won't die until you have seen the fulfillment yourself. And so Simeon was waiting to see the Messiah. And on this day when he saw the Messiah, he said, oh, now your servant may depart in peace. In other words, it's okay to die. You have fulfilled everything to me that you said you would. Now, the dear old lady, there was a prophetess, it says in verse 36, Anna, daughter of Phaleel from the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years. That's a delicate way of saying you're old. And had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then as a widow to the age of 84. She never left the temple, serving night and day with fastings and prayers. You know, they just wanted to be where God was doing what he was doing. You don't have to have a formal recruiter give you a job. You just want to be where God's working his plan out. And for them, it was in the temple. And so at that very moment, that was at the very moment when Simeon was holding Jesus, at that very moment, she came up and began giving thanks to God. Oh, she too knew that this was the fulfillment and continued to speak of him to who? This is interesting. She continued to speak of him to all those who were looking for the redemption of Jerusalem. There was a group of people, we don't know how large, but there was a group of people that were standing on the promises. There were a group of people who were standing on the promises of the Lord God himself, waiting for him to fulfill what he said he would. And she continued to speak of him to all who were looking for the redemption of Israel, for the redemption of Jerusalem. You know, the day in which Christ came into our world was a dark day, a dark time, a frightened time. Under the rule and the dominion of Rome was not an easy situation. And most people had long since given up focusing on God, waiting, longing, anticipating his intervention. To them, most people of that day, God was a theoretical idea that they had heard about, read about, but not a vital part of their soul and life as they longed for this one who was named God, the covenant God of Israel, to fulfill his promise. You see, most people, their concept of God was very distant and not involved at all in their life. Unfortunately, very much like today, there's a lot of people who know how to spell the name of God, but they don't depend on him. They don't long for him to fulfill what he said he would do. For them, God is not a major entity in their life. Oh, may that not be true of you and me. May it be true of you and me, that we, like Simeon and Anna, were standing on the promises of God, waiting for God to fulfill what he said he would do, because God is faithful. And because he is faithful, you and I hang on to that great truth, and we too grow in our faithfulness. Oh, don't you want to be like Simeon and Anna? Don't you want to grow old, continuing with God? Don't you want to finish well? I do. I do. Let's do it together. Merry Christmas.